And here we are with another Kinky Question of the Week. How you doing today, Zach?
Doing great. Nooks, how's it going?
Fan-fucking-tastic.
I always get nervous when you smile that big. It's like, oh shit, what is she actually planning?
Probably a good plan. It's if your spidey sense is tingling, it's probably a reason for it.
Yeah, you
So,
just have that reputation for being someone who is well earned, by the way.
I am a paragon of sweetness and light.
Okay. Moving on. Wow.
So anyway, today's Kinky Question of the Week is, how should I handle protocol or power exchange in public?
Interesting. That's a fun question. Gosh, there's always times I don't listen to him anymore, but if you ever listen to the Dan Savage podcast, whenever someone calls in and asks a question, he always wants the caller to leave a number so you can come back and ask them something, like get a clarification. There's a part of me that kind of wants to do the same thing. It's like, man, I have questions for the questioner, but taking it at face value, the first word that comes to my mind is consensually. It's not cool to try and make somebody be beholden to some protocols in public for a couple of reasons. One, if they didn't consent to it, that's an issue because anybody who knows me by now, my freaking website is warrior.com. If you're not doing it consensually, you shouldn't be doing it. But two, anybody who may see the various ways that you're playing with protocol didn't consent to it either. And now that's not to say if you go to a kink function, a party, a dungeon party or something like that, for the most part, people who enter a place like that at some point have consented to what they may witness. But if you're just out in a restaurant, okay, or going to dinner or going to the zoo and there may be kids around or something like that, the way you go about consenting, or rather engaging in those things in front of other people, the general public has not consented to whatever you may or may not do. I mean, there are muggles out there and you might violate their delicate sensibilities. Now, there are those who think that the most friendly when it comes to muggle people, and that's not the case, but I do respect consent. So I would say you should handle your protocols consensually, and you should have those conversations and those negotiations before comes up. I have subs in my life, and some of them are higher protocol than others, and we talk about those things. We talk about forms of address, ways of being, talking, dressing, and things like that, and fun ways to play with it. There, you can do incognito protocol stuff in a way that looks, for all the world, for lack of a better term, and I hate this word, normal, but is within the boundaries of your protocol agreements and things like that. There are ways to have somebody marked or collared that are very subtle, but it would be clear to you, for example, because ultimately your protocol and power exchanges between the two of you. But I've got friends that will go out in public and, if they're a male-female total power exchange couple, he'll order for her. They may have a discussion, but he's the one that orders, period. That may be strange or off-putting to some servers, but most professional, wait staff have learned to just fucking run with it. So there are ways to go about doing things. You just kind of have to be careful, but it's always going to be consensual. And because the last thing to do is be trying to do some sort of dom thing, for example, with a female submissive and somebody who's a pro-feminist, social justice warrior or activist, gets all over you for daring to talk to that woman that way or something like that, because people still do that. Consensually, and I would also say carefully.
I completely agree
on this one. So hey, she completely agrees. So we're good. Next question.
I completely agree. I think, though, it's worth expanding on the idea of how to do things kind of on the DL or consensually, and also how to get the thrills because a lot like doing this in public is kind of the tiptoeing that taboo line, or almost getting caught. And as we are both dominant in our relationships, so that would be our responsibility to manage our submissive's frame of mind, and allowing them that thrill of possible exposure without it actually happening and violating the consent of others. So, for example, my pet enjoys some humiliation play. One of the ways that I do that in public is I might use a word, and this is one of them, but I might use a word as innocuous as sweetie to do really fucked up, horrible things to him in private, like in bed and whatever, and say, who are you? Right in the middle of something really nasty, and make him say, I am sweetie, right? So that when you use that in public, people think, oh, look how cute, they're using pet names. Yeah, but he knows exactly what that means and what I'm thinking at that moment. Other things include, maybe having him wear panties under his jeans. And then when he goes to a public restroom, making him, stand up at a stall or at a urinal rather than going into a stall. Now, I'm not going to go in to make sure that other guys see it or whatever. It's the thrill of having to kind of sneak that through, right? Like that's the fun of it. So there's a lot of ways to play with those things, like out in public. We've done some woods primal play. And, there's a relatively popular park near here that has a lot of hiking. But there's a couple of places where you get up just kind of over a ridge from that. And nobody's going to see you unless they've got a helicopter. Right. And you can get away, but you can still hear people, on the trail, right? So you can get away with these things if you're very careful. And it's worth being careful. It's worth planning it out if that's kind of your shtick, right? Plan out how to do that in a way that you get the thrill of it, but without actually infringing upon other people's rights to enjoy their life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's important to remember that public play is an extension of your private play. So one is individualized, and it's things that work well for you. But two, privately, there's nobody involved but you and anyone who's consented to seeing it. And it should be the same publicly. There's nobody involved but, you and anyone who has consented to seeing that. So if you're at a dinner party with friends and kinky friends that have seen you play various ways before, okay, maybe that's fine. But, take it out into the woods, do something private, the thing with the bathroom. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had to go to the bathroom, remove her panties and bring them to me. And normally what I just say is surrender your panties, and they know what that means. Now, some of them will get brave and take them off at the table. I don't care. It's up to them how they do it. Some of them are a little bit more nerve-wracking. There are those that would rather not do it that way, like, take them off at the table, but like the thrill of being naughty in front of other people, then we'll do that. I've got one sub that when she comes over to my place, she gets into uniform, which basically means stripped down and accept a thong, a black thong. Well, when we go out together in public, that's what she's wearing underneath, her clothing and stuff. And there are times when I'll tell her to surrender her uniform, and things like that. So it kind of depends, but that helps them stay in that mindset, even though we're out in public and doing things. And so for them, in a lot of cases, it's just fun to do the very, very subtle things and realize that they are being played. You are doing a power exchange scene and no one else knows but the two of you. That is in many ways, part of the thrill is that it is so surreptitious and that people don't realize what's going on. Because again, like we all know, muggles don't notice things unless they're right in front of their faces. And even then they may not notice what's going on. So they tend to not pay attention to the strange and unusual. So you just kind of do things that don't look strange and unusual, or that, you know, can kind of be camo or hidden or incognito or kinkcognito, as you will. So yeah, I mean, there are fun ways to play with it and have fun creating those things and coming up with stuff. You know, I've done things where I've had a sub with me and she's not allowed to cross her legs, which, if you think about it, isn't major. But when their habit is, for modesty's sake, to always cross their legs, and suddenly they're not allowed to, and not only not cross them, but keep them open. Like, I don't want to see your knees touching each other. You know, suddenly they're in the mindset of, holy shit, I'm exposing my bits to the world. And really, they're not. They're sitting at a table. Nobody can tell. But, you know, they know. And they suddenly feel exposed. That's the kink. That's the power exchange. So you can do that in ways that, you know, don't fry the sensibilities of the nearby muggles, but yet totally extend the power exchange play from privacy into public without violating anyone's consent. And there are ways to do that. But that's what I call responsible kingdom, is that you really got to be careful how you're doing that and putting that stuff into place. And like Nikki said, planning it out ahead of time. This it really isn't necessarily random stuff, because you don't want to think that I can't do that in public argument out in public, you know. So.
And so another thing is, and this goes along with planning it, wear the correct clothing for easy access if necessary. Like I might wear like the top that I'm wearing right now out with Pet to dinner or to lunch or whatever. And after surreptitiously checking that nobody is looking, pull out a boob. I can pop it back in instantaneously because, I mean, you know, it's right here, right? Like, it's easy. But planning that ahead of time makes a difference. Knowing what the possibilities are and dressing or planning for those possibilities also matters.
Yeah. And we all know Nookie likes tormenting people by pulling out her boobs and then hiding them again. That's her thing. And yeah, the rest of us just have to suffer. But you know, but yeah, I mean,
so again, much suffering.
Plan it out ahead of time. Yeah, plan logistically, plan clothing. You know, it's you know, wrong, or not necessarily wrong, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult to expect somebody to remove their to the table if they're wearing jeans. You know, that's just,
for example.
Yeah, that's a little bit difficult to do. You know, but you know, I was with a partner one time and we were at the zoo just walking around, and I told her, yeah, I'm gonna need you to surrender your panties, mainly because she had made the mistake of telling me she's gotten wet. I'm like, good, now you're gonna need to surrender your panties. So she had to go to the bathroom, give up her panties, and bring them, and just stuck them in my hand. I'm like, good, thank you. And I, you know, put them in a pocket. We go on about our business. Like, you know, she didn't hide them or anything. She just had them crumpled up in her hand and handed them to me, which is fantastic. You know, and I was like, all right, you'll get them back at a time when I determine. And then we just go on about enjoying our day at the zoo. But, you know, meanwhile, she's now wet and has no panties on. And again, is totally in a different mindset than I was when we were watching the gorillas. So, but that's the way you extend that play. Is you kind of have fun with it like that. But yeah, plan ahead, do your due diligence when it comes to logistics, and also make sure you're adhering to consent for all involved, and especially for those who are not involved. So.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that's really key, is also be aware, because you mentioned something, the whole wet thing. Also be aware exactly how wet means. Because for some people, removing panties might mean that wherever they sit, they're leaving snail trails. And that, like, in the situation like the zoo, might not be pleasant, right? Like, so just, again, it's about planning. It's about being a couple, a team, collaborating on, you know, what will titillate and excite, while also making sure that you've got your bases covered.
Yeah, and that's going to require a negotiation ahead of time. You know, it's not cool to spring that on somebody. when they're not prepared for. I mean, I've done it where I will tell them, be prepared to surrender your panties, and never ask for them.
Right.
Anticipation is its own form of kink. So yeah, sometimes you can plan or let them know to be prepared for that, negotiate it ahead of time, and then never do it. Because they'll spend the whole night wondering when's it going to happen. And if it doesn't, it's kind of fun to play with that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we did good. I think
got
we
that one in
answered
the
that
bag.
question. Yay!
Go us.